everybody has bad days. I think kids are not ever really too young for that because they see it in us. They see it every day, right? Like sometimes we have bad days as moms and dads. And so it's never too soon to start talking about that. And then that will give them some tools as they, encounter their own grieving. Like it's not just me.
Hey everyone, welcome back to CarSeat Questions. This is season 3. We're so excited that you're joining us again. Today we're joined by Kim Erickson. Hi Kim, thanks so much for being with us today.
Hi, good morning.
So if you can just kind of start off, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you're related to Moody and what you're doing in your life and your family and all that.
Oh my gosh, all the things. Great. Well, right now I'm a kindergarten teacher and I'm loving that. I call myself a recovering attorney. So I was a elementary education teacher, and then I went to law school and had a whole law career. And then I always said when I retire from the law, I want to go back to teaching. And my sweet husband let me do it early. And so I am back to teaching and loving that. I am married to the coolest guy I know, Kim Erickson. And we had 2 boys, Austin and Ethan. Ethan is now 17, high school, taking his SATs on Saturday. And we're living here in Florida, just really loving life and really grateful for what God has done with our story and with our lives. And I know Moody because Moody publishes the stories of my heart and my passion, and that is teaching the Word of God, first and foremost, and secondly, really helping women through hard times, moms who are grieving. That's our story, and that's how I'm connected with Moody. Is they have allowed me to be used by God.
So today we're going to talk about a tough subject of loss of family members and friends, and how to talk with children about that. And I think we underestimate how often kids are faced with this, whether even it's just the ones you expect, like grandparents, as they age. I think, and sometimes it just happens sooner than we expect. And so, when I growing up, the only people I had lost in my family was my grandparents, and I was older. I was like 12, 13, 14 age. But even then it's realizing, this person isn't going to be with us anymore. They're not going to be around, and they're someone that you could talk to or call. And I think, thank God right now I haven't had a lot of loss in our life, but it is something that I think us as parents need to prepare for our kids. And even ourselves, just how do we talk well about loss and talk about it in a way that is true and honest and cares for the emotions of our kids in that time. So what do you think, I guess, why do you think it's important, and how do we talk about it with our kids, loss and death with our kids?
Well, I think it's one of the most important topics for you to be prepared for, because you are not likely to be at your best, right? It's not like a question that doesn't impact you. Like, you've also been impacted in some way, and you're also grieving, and you're also walking through questions and doubts of your own. So we're definitely not at our best usually when kids ask us questions about death and dying and God and heaven and all of those things. So I think even just journaling about it, and just making some, like, what am I going to say about heaven? What am I going to say about, what eternity, and what does heaven look like? And do we have bodies? Like, there's 1,000 questions they could ask us, and just taking a moment to think about it ahead of time is going to help you be prepared in that moment. That's also hard for you. So I think that's the important part about being prepared as a parent. It seems weird to prepare for something like that, but we prepare for so many other things. Like, I've been preparing my son, Ethan, for his SATs. We've been talking about it. We've been talking about college. Like, I, researched it, and, this is something that's going to touch your child. It is. And so preparing is just smart. And then importance wise, like, how do we do it? Oh my, I think that has a million answers as well, because it depends on the age, it depends on the relationships, it depends on so many things. But definitely the same thing holds true, like being present and being honest and listening well to them first, instead of like diving right in with your thoughts. Maybe listening and asking them questions first to say, why are you asking me that? What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Ask them what they're thinking first. Allows them to really be heard, and for you to
Mm-hmm.
pause long enough to get prepared to have the hard conversation.
Yeah. Have you found in working with parents or people in your life that have dealt with a death in their family or friendship, that when you're talking with kids, you kind of want to like move them along in the grieving process? Like you just kind of want to push them along and help them get through it and not allowing them the space to actually feel what they need?
Oh, yes. I think we all do that. I think we do that with everybody
Mm-hmm.
who's grieving, unless we're really thoughtful and
Mm-hmm.
prayerful and intentional about it. Definitely in our journey, people still expect us to be over the loss of our son,
Mm-hmm.
Austin. He died when he was 3 from strep throat. But people, like, they expect us. It's been more than 15
Mm-hmm.
years now. And they really kind of expect us to kind of be over it and not talking about it and not impacted by it. And that's just not true. So I definitely think we all have that urge because it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. So we want to move that ball forward so it's less uncomfortable for
Mm-hmm.
us and them. Like, we don't want them hurting as well. We want them to move into a space of healing. But I definitely would discourage that, because people say it all the time. It's also one of the cliches that I hear that I don't really love. That, oh, grieving is so personal and grieving takes time and everybody grieves differently. Those are all
Yeah.
true, but just hearing somebody say that is not very helpful. But yeah.
Yeah. I was talking with a friend about grief. I don't remember about exactly what, um, but she had heard this metaphor analogy where it's grief stays the same size, but we as people like grow around it. Like grief's never going to get smaller. It's always there. But we as people learn coping mechanisms and learn how to, deal with the grief, but the grief never gets smaller. It's always there. And it's not something that leaves. It's just something that's like inside of us and we kind of grow around it.
Yeah, Lauren and I have told each other that neither of us can die.
It's just, yeah.
Just because, there's been times where I've just like thought about like, it's just my personality to like think about like different scenarios that can happen in life, just because I like to be prepared and I like to like have thought about stuff already. And sometimes like the topic of like death just like, flows through my brain. Like, well, what happens if like Lauren is not going to be here tomorrow? Like, how am I going to, how do I sit in that and then also have to like somehow explain that to a toddler, a 3-year-old, that, hey, like mama's not going to be here anymore. Yeah. And I just like stop right there and was like, whoa, like he's going to think like, oh, she's going to be back. I'm like, no, like she's like gone, and I just can't even imagine trying to have that conversation.
Right. One of the things that helps me so much and helped us walk that journey with Ethan. So when Austin died, he was 3 and Ethan was about 18 months. And so his childhood has been walking through this. And one of the things that I really don't know if I could live without is the thought that she's actually not gone, right? She's in heaven, right? She's waiting for us. She's in a different place right now. We can't see her or talk to her right now, but she's not gone, right? Like she's not with us right now, but someday. And my husband and I say it a lot. We say, one day, someday, we will all be together again. And it's one of the pictures. We keep very few pictures up of Austin. It's just too hard for us. There's, parents who have lots of pictures of their, if they've lost a child, they love to have pictures around, but we're not one of those folks. We have very few pictures around. But one I love is Austin's trying to hold baby Ethan. And you know how they can't hold it? You're experiencing this now, right? Like they really can't hold him, but he's like sitting on Austin's lap and Austin's trying to hold him. And their little foreheads are together. And they're both have this huge grin on their faces. And I have that picture in my prayer room where I can see it, because every day I'm like, I'm going to have all of eternity to see those two together. And so I think that's the most important like truth for us to hang on to when we're talking to our kids is like, listen, this is not everything, right? This world is just a short little tiny part of our lives because we're eternal. And we're going to be with God, and that's going to be forever and ever and ever and ever. And we can't picture that, and they can't picture that. But it helps to tell them over and over again, like, hey, this is like short, like this is like an hour. This is, I used to say, this is like a Diego, like because he was watching Diego, like that show, or Adora, like this is like Adora, like it's going to be over in 20 minutes, or whatever. What are they into now? Paw Patrol
Yes.
and, some other things like Veggie Tales. This is going to be over in a minute. So I think that's an easy way to help them settle their souls,
That's
settle
good.
their hearts.
Yeah. So what do you think? And again, this is probably going to be dependent upon age and development and understanding, but maybe like for toddlers, right? Because this is probably something that you probably experienced as well. What are some of the themes that you think that we should stay away from, at least early on, as we walk through this process, with younger children?
Yeah, I think talking about how someone passed might not be the best area to explore. For example, Ethan, when he was littler and he began to ask how Austin died, and we told him like it was strep throat, he just got really really sick, buddy, and they couldn't make it better. And then when he got a little bit older, when he would get sick, if he felt really bad, he would be like, I need to go to the hospital. I need to go to the hospital. Like it would make him like, I knew he was processing, like, what if I get so sick they can't help me. So we have to go to the hospital now. He didn't say all that. So that's the thing to watch out for, I think, with our kids is they're probably not going to say all the things that are going on in there because they can't communicate it, especially toddlers. I think their thoughts are more complex than they can communicate. And so I think the circumstances surrounding what happened, what caused somebody to pass is a good area. Like you got to deal with it a little bit, but a good area to be very careful in to not create some sort of anxiety or trigger for them in terms of that kind of thing. So I think that's definitely one. I think another one is that it's not okay to cry or grieve, especially as a Christian, right? Like it's, and I just said, like, remember, we're not, we're not separated forever. We're going to see him again. But I think coming to that too quickly, like you said, pushing him ahead, like telling him it is okay to grieve. It is okay to be sad. It is okay to cry. Cry as long and as hard as you want, and not trying to shut down the grieving process. We do have a hope as Jesus followers. We have that great hope that helps us through grieving, but I would not push that too fast to the front.
Are there any dangers in talking to kids that like saying things like they're in a better place or they're not in pain anymore or, things like that? Is there a danger in saying those types of things to them?
Oh, that's such a great question. Is there a danger? I'm not sure there's a danger in it. But it is something people say all the time, so they're going to hear it. The thing I think with those kind of things is they aren't actually that helpful. They're like to their hurt, right? Like, and those are all true, right? But when you really think about it, that's not all that helpful. At least it hasn't been to me. And so I find those things not very helpful. And what you're trying to do is help in some way. And so I really think asking them questions is the better way to go. How are you feeling? What are you thinking about when you think about grandma? Like, what do you think she looks like right now? And just let them talk and let them ask questions, and ask questions of them are way better than some of those cliched sayings we use. And I would just encourage people to stop using them. Honestly, as a grieving mom, just stop. Like we should all just stop saying those things. And there's some that are also not biblically true, right? So watch out for those things. We're told a lot of things or people will say to them, like even in the grocery store, even at church, in your neighborhood, they will say things that are biblically not true. And that's, that's hard to deal with too. And so there's lots out there to step on and landmines, but I think going back to the Word of God and going back to God and being prayerful and intentional will help you navigate those, because they're definitely going to hear those things. They're going to hear all of those things. And my least favorite is that they're an angel. Now you have an angel watching over you. Not my grandma. Like, she's actually not an angel. Because people say that to grieving moms all the time, and to Ethan. They'd be like, "Oh, your big brother, he's now your angel watching over you." And I always have to be like, wait till we get in the car and go, okay, that's actually not true, buddy. I mean, we don't know if they can see us or not. There's so many things, but seek the Word of God, seek the wisdom of God and the discernment of God on how to navigate those kind of weird areas of what we don't know for sure. And I think that's okay too. It's okay to say, buddy, we don't actually know. Like, I don't actually know what our bodies are going to look like. There's some hints, but I don't actually know for sure.
Yeah.
And those are probably just some of like the misconceptions, right? And again, especially like for believers, I've heard that also many times, like, oh, you have an angel looking down on you or always being with you. I'm just like, I don't think so.
That's not what angels are.
That's really not how it works. We're different from the angels, like on purpose. Like, God did that on purpose, right? So he's not going to change it when we get up to heaven and turn us into angels. Like, that's not the idea. Yeah. So I think, there's some tough questions there, about, and kids especially are so visual. What will our bodies look like? You're going to get some of those questions. And, circling back to the Word of God is always a good idea. Always a good idea.
Funny story today, Trey and I were looking out the window, and there is a bee on the screen inside the window. And so Trey asked me, he's like, "Oh, is the bee, inside or outside?" I'm like, "Oh, it's inside." And he's like, "Oh, is it going to come and get us?" And I was like, "No." And I wanted to say that it was dead, but he doesn't understand what that means. So I was like,
yes,
he's not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. And then he asked me, "Is it asleep?" And I was like, "Well, yeah."
Great question.
He just won't ever wake up though. And he was like, "Oh, okay." So just interesting having this conversation today, and I had to try to navigate and try to have a conversation with a 3-year-old about a dead insect. So it's just interesting how he doesn't really understand the concept, but hey, he's sleeping, he's not going to be moving. I'm like, yeah, you're on the right track, bud.
Yes. And you know what, like, he's 3, like, he's little. Like, you don't need to go into a big discussion about that, right? Like, that was not the moment you needed to like jump in with great theology or a big discussion. Like, that's good. Like, so I also encourage parents to, like, don't get too wrapped up or go like, "Oh, this is my moment, right? I've got to talk about dying right now because he asked." And I think a lot of parents will do that. Like, we hear that advice, right? Like, talk about these subjects when your kids bring them to you. And he brought it to you. He's like, "What is it?" You brought, like, you were talking about this, right? But like, we really did need to have it right then. So that's great to have that discernment. Like, is this a right now conversation, or is this, I think we can use something similar like sleeping, because, we don't have to dive in. Yeah. That's hard though, right?
Yeah, it is hard.
Right there it was. That's what I mean. Like, everybody's going to do it. And I think that's something that we need to make sure our kids understand too, is because kids are inherently self-focused, right? Like, hey, everybody is sad. Like, sometimes, right? Like, I know it feels really hard right now to us because we're doing this, but honey, everybody you see is carrying around some sort of sorrow. Everybody you see is walking through some sort of hard time. And it's never really too early to teach your kids that, right? Because it gives them a compassion for people, and it allows them to look outward and go, "Oh, that lady at the cash register, she didn't give me a lollipop today," or whatever, right? That she didn't, well, she might have been having a bad day, right? everybody has bad days. I think kids are not ever really too young for that because they see it in us. They see it every day, right? Like sometimes we have bad days as moms and dads. And so it's never too soon to start talking about that. And then that will give them some tools as they, encounter their own grieving. Like it's not just me. And then they tend not to, I think, put it on themselves. Like I didn't do something wrong and now we don't have grandma anymore. Or, they also tend to turn everything inward. And so anytime we can get them to turn their eyes and hearts outward, we'll give them great tools for dealing with grieving and lots of other things.
So I think that would have been a perfect answer to our last question, which is what we were going to ask, what is one thing you'd want every child to understand about, sorrow and grief and loss, and death. So if there's something else you think every child should know, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, you're right. That is what I would say first and foremost. And then I would probably say the other thing I've already said too about finding something they can relate to that's over quickly. Because this life is so short and it feels so long to them, right? And so understanding how short this life is in terms of eternity. And, grownups, we can't grasp that. So, anything you can give them to grasp how short this life is and yet how precious it is, right? Like that's the really cool part. Like, why did God put me here on this time, on this earth at this time? What am I supposed to do? Like that, centering that in your child also, I think gives them lots of tools to navigate death and sorrow, is that they have a purpose here. They have been put here for a reason. And, it's going to be hard, but it's not just all darkness. Like you have a purpose, like you're doing something for God, and that's awesome. And giving them that, feeding their sorrow or pain with purpose is, so good. So good.
Yeah. I was thinking about when you said too, everyone has, something that they're dealing with. Everyone has sadness or sorrow. And I've really been thinking a lot about in my parenting of, kind of trying to give our kids a community mindset, that it's not so me centric or even just like our family centric, but there's other people here too. And I think it's come from having a new baby and figuring sibling dynamics of like, hey, I know that you want me to play with you, but there's a community here too. And I have to feed your brother, or I have to change your brother's diaper, and just, there's a community here, and doing the same, just a second, buddy, doing the same, with sadness, that we should be able to understand and see that other people are going through stuff too. And, I hope that we can cultivate that in our kids of, just seeing others in their life, seeing what others are going through or what they're working through.
Yeah, that's so important, right? And it's especially important in our closest relationships, because that's where if we're going to lash out, if we're going to, not be our best selves, it tends to be around the people who are closest to us, who we love the most. And so understanding that, you really are, in your family is super important. Our family uses a puzzle. So we did this when the kids were really little and starting to get chores. My husband doesn't love that I call them that, but chores. And when they were really little, right about Trey's age there, the job was to put the silverware away because they can match, right? So they can see a fork and they know where the fork goes. They can match it. And we did a puzzle and said, okay, well, what if we take out this piece or that piece? And is the puzzle going to work? And they're like, of course not. No. Well, our family is a puzzle and everybody has to do their part. And then that's the same as a community. So just the other day, Ethan still does it. I was like, hey, buddy, thanks for pulling in the recycle bin. Part of the puzzle piece, Mom. I'm just a piece in our puzzle.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kim, for sharing with us and sharing your story and your family's story with us. I just hope that all of our listeners can begin to prepare our kids and just our families for loss, it's inevitable. We know that it's going to happen. And so it's best to prepare us and prepare those around us for it. So thanks so much for joining us. For our listeners, thank you for joining us for this episode of season 3 of CarSeat Questions. We're so glad you're here with us. We'd like you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. And of course, rate and review it. As we're discussing for season 3, only 5 stars for Trey. He only wants 5-star reviews. Isn't that right, Trey? Yeah. Yeah, your cousins will be here soon.
Yeah.
Before we close, Eddie would like to close us in a liturgy.
Yes, so Clem, if you would join us in this benediction. To him who is able to do far more than we can understand, may he give us the wisdom to raise our children to first love God above all else and love others as themselves. Go in peace. Thanks for joining us this week on the CarSeat Questions podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and just let us know what you thought.
Be sure to follow us on YouTube, wherever you find your podcasts, Instagram, TikTok, basically anywhere, and drop your comments below about what you thought about the episode.